Hello and welcome to the Australian Roundtable podcast. It is Sunday, the 28th of December 2014. This is episode 12 of our weekly broadcast live at youtube.com/Australian Roundtable from 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time every Sunday, and also archived on the same channel for later listening if you can't tune in live. I'm your host Johnno, and I'm usually joined in the studio by Ethan Nash of TOTT News, but today he joins me online via Google Hangout. Ethan, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Now, if you're a new listener to the show, the Australian Roundtable podcast is a Brisbane-based independent news analysis discussion panel podcast that usually features an eclectic panel of presenters who come together each week to discuss recent and topical news and current affairs from Australia and around the world. Views presented by individual panelists and guests are not necessarily representative of the entire panel, and each presenter is solely responsible for his or her own comments and claims. All important information cited during the broadcast will be linked to in the info box so you can verify it for yourself, which I, for one, recommend you do. Episodes generally run 90 minutes, and timestamps are provided in the info box on YouTube so that you can skip to the parts you like if you don't have the full 90 minutes. And although it is a roundtable discussion, we do keep a rough structure for each episode, and I'll get to today's rundown right now. We'll start off with a bit of fun looking at the Gogglebox, which I know that Ethan has been looking forward to talking about all week. And then, of course, we'll jump straight back into the discussion about the so-called Sydney siege, because we only began to scratch the surface last week, and there's plenty more to discuss on that topic. Now, we were hoping to be joined by Jeff C. of Free Radio Revolution today. I'm not sure what's keeping him. Hopefully he can join us later on, and if he does, I'll let you know. But in the meantime, Ethan, it's just you and me because Lindsay hasn't been able to make it today, unfortunately. So if you're listening, Lindsay, shout out to you, mate. Hope you're doing all right. Let's get straight into the news, Ethan, and tell us all about this Gogglebox.
Well, Johnno, as you know, I'm a very big fan of watching TV from previous episodes. I love watching the news and analysing things that are happening. But if you've watched some of the ads that have been on TV lately, you see there's a new show that's about to premiere called Gogglebox. And it's the TV show about people watching TV, and it's coming to Australia. And I'll just read out a bit of a blurb that they've got on their official website. That's the premise of observational series Gogglebox, currently looking for Australian families, couples, housemates and friends who love watching TV and are not afraid of sharing their opinions. The UK format films viewers as they watch television and let fly with their opinions, which is a most unusual premise. But the show has been a surprising success as a snapshot of modern society, even picking up a BAFTA TV award for reality and constructed factual programming and spawning international versions as it's now coming to Australia. The boss of All Three Media, which is, I suppose, the network or the company behind this show, said, quote, "Everyone loves watching TV and talking about TV. But the show isn't really about TV. The show's about people's lives, their relationships, their living room, and the way children and parents talk about TV. It captures a cultural response to something that's happening around the world. Gogglebox shows TV in a people's living room is alive and well and thriving. It is asserting the indispensable role of TV in the fabric of people's lives. The series, to be produced by Shine Australia, is currently casting for Sydney and Melbourne participants. And Johnno, it's just unbelievable because when you watch the ad, it says, for years you've loved watching TV, and now the TV will be watching you. And the first thing I think to myself is, come on, do they have to have a photo of Big Brother on their TV before they get it? Before they actually understand what's happening? I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, will you be tuning into this, Johnno?
We're at the point now, and we're going to discuss this as we move on to the Sydney siege later. We're at the point now where they are satirizing themselves here. This is self-parody. And oh man, I don't know where to start, but you did actually admit last week, Ethan, that you are a big fan of TV and you watch quite a bit of it. You even told us last week that you were watching live when the Sydney siege started, and you're going to stick to that story?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's just amongst all the joking with this show, it's pretty scary. The first thing I thought when I watched the ad is it's pretty scary because these people have to sign up and then agree. And you know, we already know that most household appliances such as smart TVs and even washing machines and whatnot do record audio. Laptops are always recording audio nowadays, but now people are actually going to be signing up to have their TVs watch them while they're watching TV, and it just makes a reality show about, you know, what their opinions are on the lounge chair. And, you know, what a better way to air out who has opinions. You know, you could be sitting there criticizing Tony Abbott on the news or whatever, and it could lead to something more dangerous. It's a lot more disturbing than anything when I first saw the ad.
You know what it makes me think of? You know, with the ratings that they have for different shows, you know, this show was the highest rating, whatever. They measure that by putting something like 1,000 boxes in people's houses and measuring what they watch, and then just extrapolating from that to come up with rough figures for how many people are watching. And people sign up to that. Like, for years, people have been voluntarily signing up to have the television that they watch tracked. And it's funny because they're the people who are then used as representative of what the rest of us are watching. So the people, the people on whom the ratings are based are the people who you least want watching television in the first place. You know what I mean? They're the people who most need to get out of their houses. It's just, it's a big joke. Well, thanks for starting the show with that one, Ethan, because we do have to get into the more serious discussion, which is, of course, the Sydney siege. But if any of our listeners think that we're going to be taking this down a tone, forget about it. I've been going over this footage from the Monday and the Tuesday, non-stop, cataloguing everything, and I think I've kind of lost my mind a little bit. In the last week, I've had to watch about as much TV as the average person watches in a month. I've copped it in one big weekly dose. So I do kind of feel like I've lost some of my sanity, and that's what happens when you watch too much TV. So I hope the listeners can forgive us. But what we wanted to discuss today, Ethan, was we're going to pick up from where we left off last week. Last week, of course, we had the 5 sub-segments, and the 5th one was where we discussed all of the anomalies and the inconsistencies in the official story. Yeah. And I in particular focused on the 2 big questions. The first question was, why were the Channel 7 news team with a sniper as the siege was happening? And 2, why didn't the sniper take a shot? So I want to go into further into their official story as to why that was as our first sub-segment today. Then I want to start looking at some of the first interviewees on the morning of the event who kind of set the scene for the rest of what was to follow. Then I want to get into a discussion for our third sub-segment about the gun propaganda, because obviously for the last week or two they've been ramping up the whole guns are bad thing, you know, which is like a classic example of how having guns actually makes people safer, and yet they're using it to convince us that guns are bad, and it's working. Man, it's crazy stuff. And then the fourth sub-segment in this topic will be the father of one of the victims, because when you look at some of the footage of him, it is very suspicious stuff. So those are the 4 sub-segments we'll look at today, and then we'll get into a general broader discussion about the Sydney siege. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, so the first thing, now last week, for the listeners who tuned in last week, we looked at those 2 big questions. Why was the cameraman with the sniper as the siege was happening, and why did he take the shot? And I mean, these are very simple questions that a lot of people were asking, which is why I noticed that their answers as to why this was the case were changing. I want to play now over the microphone some footage that I've taken from Channel 7 trying to answer this very question. Now, this is from December 17, and it was a segment entitled, from Channel 7, again, our major broadcaster in this country, and of course the channel that I believe is heavily intertwined with this entire operation. This segment was called The Reason Snipers Didn't Shoot, and I'm going to play it in full right now. I think it's about 2 minutes 30. So listeners, please bear with us. I'm going to play this in full. This is their explanation as to why the snipers didn't shoot when he had a clear line of sight to the supposed gunman.
As Australia mourns the victims, questions are being asked about the police response. Specifically, could they have disabled him earlier? 7 News has learned what was understandably holding them back, his backpack, because he convinced the hostages and police it was a bomb, but it wasn't.
It's the question being asked by so many. If our camera had a clear shot, so did the sniper sitting beside us. So, why didn't he shoot? Experts say there are several reasons. Firstly, he and the other snipers nearby would have been shooting through reinforced glass.
Where you seek to take a shot through glass, the ballistics of it are virtually impossible.
The bullet's path could alter by centimetres, possibly killing a hostage. A kill shot is always a last resort.
That's not what we do in this country, or not that I want to see.
Another reason the snipers held back, that backpack. 7 News can reveal that the pack had wires hanging out of it. It turned out the gunman was carrying an old stereo speaker, but at the time the police didn't know that and had to assume the worst. Possible explosives with a dead man switch, like this movie version.
Oh, I have to. Okay, now I have to press pause there. you guys can't see this, but as he said that he might have had a dead man switch, they played a screenshot from that Keanu Reeves movie. You know that one with the bomb on the bus?
No.
What was that one called? Speed? You know the one where there was a bomb? Oh my God, I didn't even notice that when I first watched this clip. Anyway, we'll carry on with the rest of this clip.
And overall, it's about a peaceful resolution. That's what we're seeking. That's our #1 goal.
Former police negotiator Belinda Neal says disasters like the Munich Olympic siege and the Beslan school siege prove talking them out is better than taking them out.
It's more successful and there's less loss of life.
The other question being asked, why didn't Army Special Forces move in? The Tactical Assault Group 2 Commando is based at Holsworthy, 75 minutes away. The government trumpeted their launch after the September 11 attacks, but Commissioner Scipione says his officers were better suited.
They are not just well trained, they are well practiced because they do this every day, as opposed to a group that would do it maybe not as often.
And Chris, you have exclusive details from police about the moment they burst in on the gunman.
Well, Mel, yes, we've been told that in those terrifying seconds that the police stormed into the Lindt Cafe, Aaron Morris was heard to say, scream in fact, "Look what you've made me do."
Okay, that's enough from that clip. So, and this guy is Chris Reason, and I'm telling you, I'm going to expose this guy. He is at the heart of the whole thing. He was the reporter who was with the cameraman when he was with the sniper. He's the one whose story changed from, we had to negotiate with these people, and after a few hours they let us back, to all of a sudden, oh no, as soon as the snipers came, they wanted to use our cameras because apparently the snipers can't shoot more than 30 meters without our without our cameras. I mean, this Chris Reason guy is at the heart of the whole thing, and sure enough, when they're giving us their nonsense story about cables coming out of the backpack, he's at the heart of it again. Ethan, what do you think of this?
No, well, we already spoke last week about how they can't even keep their story the same in the same news segment. So why are we supposed to believe anything that they say once they actually supposedly get insider perspectives on it? It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you can't believe.
There's a few things.
You can't believe this.
Sorry, mate. There's a few things from that clip that even on their own, they're ridiculous. You know, the claim about the cables coming out of the backpack, the claim that, we can't shoot through glass, you know, it's ballistically impossible, whatever their stupid story was, and then their story of, we didn't want to storm in there and have anyone die, except that that's exactly what they ended up doing anyway. I mean, none of it makes sense. But then come out and say, we can reveal an exclusive from the police that as we stormed the building, man Aaron Monos was heard to scream, "Look what you've made me do."
You can't make it up.
Who could believe this stuff, man? Seriously.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and I should have said at the start of the show, you and I, we've never done a live broadcast. We usually broadcast, over the internet. We usually broadcast from a little makeshift studio. So it's going to be a bit harder for us to try not to speak over the top of one another, but we're going to get used to this. So to the audience at home, just bear with us. We're going to get used to broadcasting over the net because, of course, we had to do this to try and accommodate Jeff, who still isn't in the room. So hopefully we hear from him later on. Now, I wanted to move on to the next part, Ethan, which was the first interviewees. Now, the reason why I think they're significant is because they set the narrative for the rest of the day and indeed for the entire story. The first interviewees who spoke to the cameras as the siege was breaking. Now, I mentioned on We'll Do It Live or on the Max Resistance Roundtable a couple of weeks ago this Bruno character, and that I thought he was going to be at the heart of it. I haven't had a chance to look too far into his backstory, but we did briefly on that show then. All I'm going to play right now is a clip from Bruno, which was first aired a couple of hours after the siege began, and then he ended up being used right through to the 6 p.m. news. You know, he was the guy on the scene. I'm going to play this clip in full. Just bear with me.
Now, we heard earlier from a worker at the Lindt Cafe calling himself Bruno.
Yeah, calling himself Bruno. And again, this is as the siege was. This was as the siege was happening. This was broadcast. This is from the ABC. This particular interview. But as I said, Bruno was used by all the outlets to set the narrative. So here we go.
You can expect he was enormously concerned for his colleagues. Let's hear what he had to say.
10, I got there like 9:45. I walked up to the door and then everyone was sitting down and the door was locked, which is pretty weird because it's never locked.
So he just said, I walked up there and I couldn't get in because the door was locked, which was pretty weird because it's never locked.
And there was one guy walking around with a hat and a beard, and yeah, he was just walking around just there, and I think I saw my manager there.
So there was a guy in a hat and a beard just walking around, and I think I saw my manager there. Listen to that again.
Walking around with a hat and a beard, and yeah, he was just walking around just there, and I think I saw my manager there. And then I was talking to another guy. He told me it was armed robbery, and then that's when the police showed up, and then they cordoned off the whole area, and then that's when everyone inside put their arms against the window, like hands up, and then they put an ISIS sign up on the window.
So there was one guy and he put an ISIS flag on the window.
Oh, that's what I saw. I don't know how many people were in there.
Did he have a gun?
I don't know. I didn't see anything.
Did he have a gun? I don't know. I didn't see anything. Listen to this again.
On the window.
So there was one guy and he put an ISIS flag on the window.
Oh, that's what I saw. I don't know how many people were in there.
Did he have a gun?
I don't know. I didn't see anything. There's like a wall at the door, so you can't really see. So, yeah.
So did he see the guy or did he not see the guy? If he saw the guy, then he would have seen the gun. But he's saying, oh, I don't know, I didn't see it. Like, this is completely ridiculous, but it gets worse.
Pardon?
Have you heard from anyone who worked with him?
No. People I've called who haven't answered their phone, and I don't want to call my manager just because I don't want to put him in a position he doesn't want to be in.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but you must feel pretty lucky that you missed it by a couple of minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I would rather be in there with them than be out here not knowing, you know? No, it was like a black flag with white writing on it. I didn't really understand it. But yeah, I got there 9:45, door was locked, which is never locked. And then, yeah, everyone was sitting down, which is weird. And the guy was walking around, and then that's when the police came, cordoned off the area. And that's when everyone was starting to move back. Everyone put their hands up against the window and they put the flag up. I couldn't really see, it was too dark in there. But yeah, I just saw him sitting there. There was just a lot of people in there. So yeah.
A young worker from the Lint Cafe who wasn't in at work earlier this morning when the siege began.
Okay, so that's the clip. Thanks again to the listeners for bearing with us there. I hope the audio is coming through okay. Ethan, did you manage to hear all of that?
Yeah, I did. Definitely.
What do you make of that? That's probably the first time you've heard that, right?
Well, I remember watching that last week, and similar interviews like that, and just you can't take that seriously. How can you take anything that guy says seriously at all? It's just completely from the very beginning where, oh, I think I saw my manager there. Well, that's usually what happens when a manager owns a store. He's usually at the store. From he put up an ISIS flag to I don't know what the flag was to.
Here's the thing, though. I think when he says, "I think I saw my manager there," I think that's just part of building the story that Tory Johnson was in the building, because there's no other evidence that he was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In none of the photos they show us do you see any evidence that he was there. But for some reason, Bruno manages to throw in, "Oh, and I think I saw my manager there." Now, you either see your manager or you don't. And if you're not sure, why would you put that into what you're saying anyhow? Like, think about the reasoning. Why would he say mid press interview, whatever you want to call it? Why would he say mid interview, "Oh, and I think I saw my manager there"? What would be the purpose other than to get it in our minds that the guy was there in the first place?
Yeah, and that's what I was about to elaborate on. It was just a poorly constructed, impromptu sort of interview that he did, or maybe it was intentionally poorly constructed, but it was to set the narrative early on that all of these people are in the cafe and that something's happening, that to put the resonation of fear into people with the word ISIS. It's all constructed like this, and I don't see how anyone could take it seriously, but it's there for the general public who will take that seriously and put it into their subconscious, because they're not going to question this, are they?
Look, I wouldn't have thought so. And what's interesting is only for the first time today, because basically my method was, as soon as I heard about this, I hit record on the PVR so I could go back and look at all of this stuff. Because when you look at it sort of in isolation a week or two afterwards, it's so glaringly obvious exactly what's going on. But when it happens live, it's a bit harder to be objective about it. So that's why I wanted to do that. And I've been going back, methodically cataloging everything that they say and do, on the live broadcasts as it happened. And so until this morning, I hadn't actually had a chance to look at the footage from the Today Show, which is the one that airs after sunrise. And for our non-Australian listeners, the sunrise is the one with Natalie Barr, the presenter who pretended to cry but didn't have any tears when she was talking about one of the hostages who supposedly died. Same program, except this is the one that airs after that. They were on air live at the time when this was announced, and today was the first time I had a chance to see that footage. Now, I've got a lot of footage that I want to play today, so I'm not going to play that particular clip, but you can find it on YouTube. It's actually still up on the Today Show's own YouTube account, so if you just go to YouTube and check out Today Show, Sydney Siege, or something like that, you're bound to find it. You have to see it to believe it. But what's interesting is they actually show footage of someone leaving from one of the exits live at the time. So if we're to believe Bruno's story, he's walked up to the main entrance, couldn't get in because it was locked, and it's never locked, and then next thing you know, he doesn't try and go through another entry that we know for a fact is open. It doesn't make any sense, but it especially doesn't make any sense because in that live footage from Sunrise, you can actually see a guy leaving the building. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
Who was he? Who was he? How'd he leave if no one else... I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's on film. He just presses the button and the door was unlocked the whole time.
Oh yeah, and there was that.
Yeah, there was that guy.
Yeah,
and there was the other guy. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Just the whole thing, man, is so ridiculous. But anyway, that was one of the first interviewees, and I'm not going to bore people by going through all of the interviewees, but there was one more person who I wanted to show today who helped to set the scene for the whole thing, and this was a girl named Catherine Chi, I believe. So I'm going to play this clip. Again, this is from the day. This was at about 3 o'clock that they aired this on ABC, so still relatively early into the siege. The story with this girl is that she was a Lint employee who wasn't even at the scene. She just saw it on TV, but they decided to run with her phone and video interviews throughout the day, again, to set the narrative. Check some of this out.
If you are just joining us, we are following this continuing siege in the heart of Sydney's CBD, coming on the 7th hour now of that siege. Now, this is in the Lint Cafe, which is in Martin Place in Sydney, and an employee of that cafe was watching television earlier this morning when she saw some of her colleagues had been taken hostage. She, in fact, recognised them on the television.
Yeah, this is Catherine Chi, who works at the Lint Cafe in Martin Place, was about to leave home this morning when she saw the news. The 25-year-old spoke with our reporter Claire Aird, and she says that she still fears for the safety of her colleagues and, of course, the customers as well.
Got ready as usual. I'm still in my uniform. Was just about to leave, was going to get in there a little bit earlier because Christmas rush has been busy and wanted to get in there early to help them out. And I was just about to walk out the door when Mum said, Lint Martin Place is being held up. And I said, oh, what are you talking about? And rushed back inside and looked at the news, and, you know, they said there was a siege, and I was shocked. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and she just keeps on going on rambling and bumbling about like that. But here's what I'm saying. Think about this. To try and set the scene, the narrative for the whole day, they interviewed a guy called Bruno who supposedly worked there but couldn't get in when he went to start his shift, and who, as we've already just shown, his whole story doesn't make any sense. The other key person that they used to push their narrative of the day was this Catherine Chi character, and she didn't see anything. She saw it on TV. So why the hell are they even interviewing her in the first place? She hasn't got any insight to offer. She hasn't got any, but for some reason they decided to use this interview as a centerpiece for the narrative of the day. What do you think about this?
Oh, it's just, you can't, no, it's just unbelievable. I can't believe that people buy into this. That comes back to the main point, but it's important because all of these little pieces are in both reversal and the official story. Like the official story, they need these little pieces to, as we said, paint the narrative, paint what's happening in there without actually providing any real evidence that they should do as objective journalists. And reversal, when we're breaking it down, it's important to show these witnesses that are contradicting themselves, or these interviewees that are just spitting complete BS, because that can break down the story to show how the very foundations and how this narrative was established is completely uncredible.
Exactly. And when you're watching this live, and most people when they watch this live are going to believe that it's true, they have no reason to doubt it, they don't think that way. You can get away with just playing someone who wasn't even at the event as your credible witness to build the story. You can get away with that because people aren't thinking. But then when you go back a week or two later and you realize, hold on, how come the person telling us the story, building this narrative, is someone who, even by her own admission, only saw this happen on TV, just like all of the viewers at home? It's ridiculous. And that's exactly why I decided, as soon as I heard about this, to just hit record on the PVR so I could go back and look at this, because, like I said, when you do, without the fog of the live event in your mind, when you just look at it objectively, the whole thing stinks to high heaven.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, I do have a couple more clips, Ethan, that I wanted to play before we get into our general discussion. And this one is to do with the gun propaganda. Now, I know, all jokes aside, you try and avoid the TV because you're a smart man. That's what smart people do. But have you been paying attention to any of this, so-called debate about guns that's been taking place since the event?
Yeah, definitely. It actually come the very first day while the siege was happening. It was actually being debated online, saying, well, if the citizens were allowed to have guns, the shooter would have been dead by now, or the defensive mechanisms would have been a lot stronger for them to combat something like this. And there was a whole range of debates. A couple of politicians were getting involved in it on social media like Twitter and whatnot. And after that, because it was making sense to people, the mainstream media came in over the top, overwhelmingly pushing for, to push gun propaganda. And then Tony Abbott with false information during his press conference saying that Monis had a gun license, and all of this nonsense to really try and overpower any, general discussion on it. So yeah, I have seen it from, the very beginning.
Yeah, and I noticed that it wasn't just on the one channel. This really has been the typical full court press. Every single part of the mainstream media is in on the same act. So I could play a clip from any of them, and it should be obvious what they're doing. I just want to play one clip right now. It's only a short one, to give the listeners who aren't in Australia, who haven't been paying attention to the media, just a basic idea of the kind of propaganda that they've been pushing since this event. Because obviously there's some people out there saying, well, hold on, if people were allowed to own guns, then obviously this wouldn't have been able to happen as easily. So they've had to counter it with their own nonsense propaganda. So I want to play a clip where you can see how they've tried to push the anti-gun propaganda, even at a time when it's obvious that people being allowed to own guns would have been a good thing.
There has been a strong backlash to crossbench Senator David Leyonhjelm's call for guns to be available for self-defence in the wake of the deadly Lind Cafe siege.
Now, David Leyonhjelm is a senator. He's a libertarian. He's the closest we have to a libertarian in this country, at least in our political system. And so he made the obvious comment after the siege, well, if people were allowed to own concealed carry guns, people wouldn't be able to hold up, cafes like this. So she's referring to his comments and then the backlash against him. Check this out.
Many of you have made your feelings known on the 7 News Facebook page today. Nat suggests the senator go live in the United States for a few years and then broach the subject again. Twit. From Laura, I have heard some stupid things come out of politicians' mouths, but you take the cake. Katie says it won't pass. I can understand the theory behind it, but they are not saying the bad it could do as well. Anne believes, no, definitely not. We need to tighten them. From Sam, we don't need more people to use guns against humanity. We need the laws and the judges to give tougher sentencing to those who commit crimes. Stephanie says the only people who should carry guns are police, security and the ADF, period. From Gary, we don't need to become America. Typical knee-jerk reaction from politicians. And from Simon, he is an idiot. There has been a...
So there you go. They've played out 8 tweets or Facebook status updates or, 7 or 8, whatever it was. And, of course, every single one, every single one is anti-gun gun rights, pro-police state nonsense. And it's like the point I always make. If you look at things like the Ash experiments, where basically they find that humans, even the ones who think they're smart, are social animals who conform to group norms or whatever. So long as there is a unanimous position taken by a group, humans tend to take that position as well. And that's exactly what this is all about, showing 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it is, tweets or status updates, all pushing the pro-gun control. So the mindless viewer at home just goes along with it. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's typical, and they do this with most events that happen. They try to, push whatever it is their agenda is. And as we've spoken on previous podcasts, I've seen firsthand how they're censoring and removing comments from everyone that expresses an opinion that isn't suitable to their agenda. So they're openly choosing to just play the ones that do suit their agenda on air, but on social media they're also removing the ones that that counteract what they want to push, and it's really troubling to see. And most of these accounts are probably made up, and we already know that news pages and politicians already buy fake likes, so most of these people have probably been made up, and no one's going to question it because people just want to push their agendas. And it's a really sensible argument that the Australian public should be having, to say, well, if we did have guns to defend ourselves, maybe this could have prevented it. And I don't see why all of those comments that were read out don't actually address the point at all. They're addressing other circumstances. People forget that once guns were taken away in Australia, robbery went up, violence went up, everything, house break-ins went up. All of these statistics went up as soon as our guns were taken away in 1996. And it's a conversation Australia should be having, but obviously the powers that be don't want an informed, armed public capable of defending themselves intellectually and in the physically, and it's really distressing to see.
Yeah, and basically the whole gun debate is it's its own issue, of course. The reason why I take this clip is because it just shows how much control the media have over the minds of the masses. And like you said, those people who they quoted could be made up. They could just be completely made up and not exist. And who's going to ever know the difference? At the same time, though, it wouldn't surprise me if all those ones that they took were legitimate, because there are people out there who, and I use this word loosely, think that way. Of course, they're not really thinking, they're just regurgitating what they're told to regurgitate. But there are people out there who are like that, who, if there's a clear example of how people being allowed to own concealed carry could have saved the day. I mean, if we buy into the, of course, this is if you buy into the narrative of the day. Let's just pretend for a moment that, there was a gunman who had a siege and all the rest of it. Let's just pretend for a moment. Well, this is a classic example where people being allowed to own guns would have been a good thing. The guy who supposedly had the gun was a criminal anyway. What does he care if there's laws against guns? He's going to have one anyway. He's a criminal. That's what they do. Whereas the people, law-abiding citizens, if they have concealed carry with them on the day of the Sydney siege, then they've got defence and the gunman doesn't last 2 minutes. I mean, it's common sense. That's
right. I mean, having gun laws does not stop people getting guns. It just stops actual people that actually love guns and are gun enthusiasts and general public not being able to defend themselves. And I just think that their fake narrative, as I believe that this whole event happened, that there was gunmen and everything, has backfired on them again, because all of these questions are starting to be raised that are in areas that I don't think that they may have predicted. So they have to come out and attack any direction that tries to question this, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the gun control, with why didn't the snipers shoot. All of these questions that have been coming out, they have to contradict these with explanations that really don't make sense and really don't take democratic values into consideration, which they never have. The media are just going to regurgitate, and the opinion of the public has been constructed by that. It's been constructed. And people our age, people who are sort of anywhere really from their early 30s downwards in Australia, have been brainwashed within an inch of their lives to believe that guns are bad. Okay, guns are bad, guns are bad, guns are bad. It's hammered home as part of the school curriculum that guns are bad. People our age and younger just don't know any different than to believe that guns are bad, you shouldn't be allowed to own guns, etc. And so, like, one of those tweets that they showed, again, they could be real, they could be fake, but I'm happy to take them at face value and pretend that they're real. It said, the only people who should be allowed to own guns are the police and the military. Now, could you have a peasant who is any more brainwashed than to believe that? Seriously. And there was some experiments done, and I can't remember the exact name, so I apologize for not having the details in front of me, but talking about how when people are presented with a gun or an environment where there is a gun, they are afraid of the gun itself because the gun has been constructed to be this representation of evil and bad that shouldn't be in the hands of the public, sorry. And but most people don't look at a gun as something that can protect them, and it doesn't resonate in their mind that it takes someone to actually use that for it to be harmful. They think it's harmful before anyone uses that, and that's the overall mentality of what has been manipulated into the general public.
Yeah, it has, and I think it's called hoplophobia. I might be mistaken, but the fear of guns. And
Yeah.
you're right, it has been drilled into people to the point now where a lot of people, if you were to put them into a room, just them and a gun and no one else, they'd be just as scared as if you put them into a room with a tarantula. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas the tarantula is actually able to move around and potentially come and crawl on their leg or whatever, the gun's just sitting there. But they've been so trained to be afraid of them. I put to you that the average person in Australia, especially people, like I said, in their 30s or younger, would genuinely have the same reaction to being in a room with a gun, even if there's no one else, as they would being in the room with a potentially dangerous animal. It'd have the exact same effect on their brain. That's the power of the conditioning that's been performed upon them their entire school lives.
That's exactly right, and it's really troubling because the programming is just so just in every aspect of life from the minute you're born, and this is something that we're trying to contradict, and it's just trying to fight against. I'm sorry, and it's just really hard to get around because the programming is so strong, and we were once a part of it, and we were fortunate enough to get out of the matrix to see it. But it's just distressing to see that there is an agenda out there that people want to push, and it goes a lot deeper than most people realize.
It really does go deep, and I'll give a personal example here. In my late teens, I think it was, I first saw Ron Paul in 2007 when he was running in the Republican primaries. And this is back when I used to think there was a difference between Republican and Democrats and all the rest of it. So forgive me for that, I was naive. But at the time I saw Ron Paul, and he was in one of the primaries, Republican primaries. He hadn't been eliminated yet. And he made a very sensible point about US foreign policy that I thought was just common sense. And next thing, he was getting booed and hounded by his own party. You know what I mean? Like, he's running as a potential Republican. He's being booed at his own convention for stating what I thought was common sense views. So I decided to look into this Ron Paul guy, and a lot of what he said I thought made sense. He just basically said, as long as people aren't harming each other, leave them alone. And so I started reading up about libertarianism and all the rest of it, the little phase that most people should go through at one point or another, reading up about different political philosophies. And I liked most of what he was saying, but even I back then couldn't bring myself to say that people should be allowed to own guns. So even as I was rejecting, the state having too much power, and I was rejecting the idea that you should be allowed to tell others how to live their lives without harming people, even despite all that, it took me several more years before I completed the deprogramming to realize that we should be allowed to own guns. In fact, we should own guns. It's the most important thing that we can have to protect us from tyrannical governments. It took me years and years of deprogramming to get over that hurdle. And I think the reason for that is, like we've said, they condition you from a young age to think that guns are bad, that you shouldn't be able to own them. And it can take a long time to overcome that conditioning. It really can.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why events like the Port Arthur massacre that happened were so important in Australian history, just as this Sydney siege is, because they've set the tone for what's to come. And because of that, a whole generation of new people have been brought up through their parents witnessing what happened at Port Arthur, the staged event that happened there to take away our guns, and now Australia is completely helpless, and that's why they're testing all of these things on us here, because we don't have much to defend ourselves over here. All we've got left is the internet and thought to try and spread our ideas and our thoughts to like-minded people, and that's being diminished on a daily basis, as it seems. So, as you said, the program is just so strong, and it's something that we're trying on a daily basis to try and to try and get rid of here in Australia, because it's vitally important here, because we don't have the fundamental rights that we should have as a free society.
Yeah, and while you were talking, Blah Blah Tuesday in the live chat just said, "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight." And the reason why that's funny to me is because, of course, that guy down in southeastern Melbourne a few months ago who supposedly tried to behead police, that's exactly what he supposedly did.
That's right.
The official story, I forget his name temporarily, but you know the one I'm talking about 3 or 4 months ago, there was that supposed
Newman
terrorist, Newman Hater, that's the one, who supposedly wanted to behead a police, and apparently he thought the best way to do that would be to go to a police station and try and behead policemen who have guns. I mean, that story was so ridiculous, and yeah, they want us to believe that terrorists are so dumb that they'll take knives to gunfights, but they also want us to believe that they're so smart that they're going to put alarm clocks in their backpack and hang the cables out the back and make us think that it's a dead man switch.
I mean, 30 meters. Come on, 30 meters is not that long to see from a professional perspective that could not be a bomb. I mean, you've got to think logically here. These people are supposedly, if you believe the official narrative, they're supposedly trained to assess all of these situations, yet snipers needed cameras to see from 30 meters away. There was people all surrounding the building that couldn't get at least a glimpse to say, hey, I don't think that's a bomb. I mean, it's just completely ridiculous, Johnno.
It is utterly absurd, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I think that this so-called Sydney siege, as far as people like us who want to expose how the media lie and how they allow just complete nonsense to get through unchecked, this is going to be the gift that keeps on giving, because between last week's show and this week's show, sure, we're going to expose a lot about what the media has said and done and the lies that they've told, but we're only going to be able to scratch the surface. There is so much to this entire hoax, and I'm happy to call it a hoax, and I'll get to that later on the show. Of course, last week we both stated, I don't want to speak for you here, Ethan, but we both stated that we thought it was clearly a staged event. Clearly the media was lying about the whole thing. There was no question about that. The only issue was, well, you know, is it one of those staged events where people actually get hurt, you know, by a patsy or by whatever, or is it one of those staged events where nobody died, nobody got hurt? And later in the show, I'm going to go into further detail as to why I'm now in the latter camp very firmly. But even if you believe that this event was real, the way that they then cover topics like the gun debate or the gun issue, I mean, it's not really a debate. If you just play 8 tweets that all say the same thing, there's no debate there. That's just overt propaganda. So even if you believe the official narrative of the so-called Sydney siege, surely if there's any part of your brain that's still thinking for itself, you have to question how and why they get away with pushing this anti-gun propaganda.
Yeah, and that's the point we were both trying to make last week at the start of the show, was that no matter whether it's a hoax, a staged event, or it actually happened, the official story happened, people are benefiting from this. There's an agenda at hand here, and it's a fact that they're benefiting from it. And that's just another part of the puzzle that they're benefiting from. Once again, crushing the gun debate in Australia, which hasn't been here for a very long time because we got all of our guns taken away from us. Now it's started to rise again, thankfully, due to some people that put in the effort on the day. And once again, the agenda's being served that they have to crush it again. So even if it's a real event, they're once again reinforcing the notion that guns are bad, that they're playing on the emotions of the public to generate revenue. All of these things are being benefited from, and it's something that needs to be addressed and exposed.
Yeah, and as we discussed last week, they are trying to push this meme of, oh, look, the tactically dressed police officers, the ones carrying the machine guns, the full heavy boots, balaclavas even, these guys are good guys, we need them because of the terrorists. So, and this is where they come unstuck, is because they try and push two narratives that don't actually go together. But and it only works if people aren't thinking. On the one hand, they're trying to push the narrative of, look, your police need machine guns. Machine guns, your police need machine guns. But at the same time, you shouldn't even be allowed to own a handgun because guns are bad. You know what I mean? They're trying to push both narratives at the same time. It's like how they're trying to get us to believe that Muslims in other countries are evil and we should go and bomb them. But the Muslims in our country are fantastic. We should have more of them. We have to sit with them on buses, all this other stuff. They're trying to push dual narratives that don't actually go together. And the moment that people start to wake up to one, they'll wake up to the rest, which is why I have so much hope for, I don't want to call it a movement, but the group of people who are questioning this and exposing the lies, that's one of the reasons why I have so much hope for it, is because they're trying to push double narratives that don't actually go together, and they have to affect their agenda. And like we've just said, on the one hand, they want to tell us that guns are bad, 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 but hey, look, we're giving them to your police force. people are going to start
Mm.
questioning that.
That's right, and that's so easy to expose at the smallest level to the public, and that's one of their flaws that they are failing in, is that because everything is escalating so fastly, they have to push separate narratives while accentuating the state's narrative whilst demonizing the critical thinker, and it just contradicts itself, and they can't get away with it because it's so easily exposed. You can explain it to any person with a semi-functioning brain will say, yeah, well, they are contradicting themselves. How can they push an acceptance of a militarized police state whilst trying to tell us that defending ourselves is bad, when all throughout history we've shown that governments and tyrannical regimes are the most responsible for the highest death count of humans, other than natural causes. It's just ridiculous.
It is utterly absurd. And just on that topic with pushing memes, I should have said at the start of the show, for people who are listening to the Australian Roundtable for the first time, on last week's show we dedicated a full 2 hours. It was a lengthy show all to the Sydney siege, and we covered a few set parts of it. We covered the legislative background leading up to Monday, and how over the last few months especially they've been ramping up the pro-police state propaganda and all the rest of it. Pardon me, they've been doing that. They've been passing legislation that take away our rights. The whole Newman-Hayter thing was an integral part of all of that. So we discussed that in the first segment. We also discussed what happened on the day and the things that were drowned out of the media. There was the NBN, there was the East-West link, the MyEFO, the budget update, $10 billion further in deficit than we were 6 months ago. And, of course, the Craig Thompson case, those 4 things. So we went into some detail about that. And we spent a lot of time talking about all the inconsistencies of the day. And we also spent some time looking at Tessa Coombe, who, of course, was the originator of that I'll ride with you hashtag. And just on that, quickly, I'll tie it into that first segment that we did on the Bruno, the so-called Lint employee. If you look into Bruno's background, on the day of the siege, he was pushing the Pray for Sydney meme. Pray for Sydney, and then what happened was the I'll ride with you hashtag took over. And what I think might have happened there was that the I'll ride with you hashtag actually was an organic thing, that the girl who started that, who we covered in last week's episode, she actually wasn't part of the whole psyop. She just started that. It took off, it went viral, and then the media was sort of forced to cover it. I suspect, and I can't prove this, but I suspect that their original plan was to use Pray for Sydney, just like Boston Strong and Cassidy Stay Strong and all these other hashtags and memes that they push. I suspect that Pray for Sydney was planned for this one, but then an organic hashtag took over and ruined their little site. That's just my suspicion. I can't prove it. I'm working on a few videos at the moment, and hopefully I'll get a chance to make a video on that. But I just wanted to bring that back to the question of Bruno. These characters, I don't just look at what they're saying and how they're like. I do try and look at their background as well. And the more you do it, the deeper this rabbit hole goes. And one of the guys in the live comments said earlier on that the rabbit hole goes deep. Yeah, you better believe the rabbit hole goes deep. Towards the end of the show, I'm going to talk about the thing I've been looking forward to talking about the most today. I'm saving the best for last, and that is to do with a film that was filmed. Well, I don't want to say too much, but we'll get to that now. Ethan, we did want to touch on a few sub-segments today before we got to the general discussion. And I do just have to remind our listeners, if you're listening live, which we have like 30 live listeners at the moment, which is amazing. Thank you all for spreading the word about the show. There is a live chat box. So at the moment, we've got Green Man, Silver Slave, Justice for Germans, Colin White. They're all in there having a chat. So if you're listening live, do please join them. They're having a really good chat, guys. Thanks for the comments. We appreciate it. There was one more sub-segment that we wanted to discuss today, Ethan, before we get into the general discussion, and that was the smiling father. Now, have you managed to see much footage of Ken Johnson, the supposed father of one of the supposed victims?
Yeah, I've looked into this a lot, and we spoke about it before we went on air last week, having a look at some of the photos on there, and it's just, if that's not a smoking gun in itself, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, a smoking gun. And for a lot of people, what woke them up to Sandy Hook was the performance of one of the so-called fathers who was laughing a day after his daughter has supposedly been brutally murdered along with 19 of her classmates. What the hell is this guy doing laughing? Then there was the footage of Wayne Carver, the supposed coroner, just acting like a complete buffoon. I mean, I normally don't try and wake people up in real life. I normally don't bother. But if people are saying, what have you been doing lately? What are you up to? What do you do? I say, well, I have a show. We talk about some things you probably haven't really heard of. Oh, why do you believe that? Well, I'll tell you what. Can I show you one clip? I'll just show you one clip, and you tell me what you think. And just the other day, I showed people that clip of Carver, And even people who generally would never, ever think that the media is lying to them, even they were sitting there watching this cover clip going, what on earth? Like, what on earth? And that's where I think Sandy Hook, they really shot themselves in the foot with these terrible crisis actors. I think the crisis actors can be an easy way to get people to question the beliefs they have about a narrative, because in isolation, without the media, bombardment of the day, if you just look at these people in isolation, it's clear that something is amiss. And I think it's the same case with this Ken Johnson guy. Now, he is supposed to be the father of Tory Johnson, that Lindt manager who we've seen no footage of, but who Bruno reminded us was in there, or he might have been. I might have seen him. I don't know. This is that guy's father. I want to play just a 1-minute clip from the news, and this is just one. I've got 2 clips. I won't play the other one, but both of them show this guy laughing. Check this out.
From the very moving memorial in Sydney to the victims of the Lindt Cafe siege. The emotion you can feel here is overwhelming, and all day we've seen people burst into tears. They came in their thousands, people who never knew the 2 hostages who died when the siege came to its bloody end, and people who did know cafe manager Tory Johnson and lawyer Katrina Dawson. Earlier this afternoon, colleagues from Katrina's legal offices came down here to lay flowers in her memory in what was an incredibly emotional scene. And we also saw Lindt Cafe workers from suburban Sydney make the journey here to Martin Place, where they laid a shrine to Tory. It was made of Lindt chocolates and a worker's apron. Former Prime Minister John Howard was also here laying.
And I'll just pause it there. The reason why I wanted to play the first half of this clip is because this is typical of the coverage for the whole week. They showed so much footage of the so-called Flower Memorial, so much footage of all of the so-called friends or well-wishers laying flowers and all of this. This became a central part of the whole narrative because they didn't actually have any evidence of Tory Johnson being in the building. There's no photos of him. There's no videos of him. There's nothing. So every time they're talking about Johnson, they have to talk about the flowers. And what happens is, for the average person who believes in all of this, they come to see that memorial as being evidence of the whole thing. Like, the two go hand in hand. Whereas if you're someone like us, you say, well, hold on, I'm happy to believe that he was there and that he died, but just show me a single photo of him in the building, which they can't do because I would infer such photos don't exist. But here's where it gets interesting.
Flowers and bowing his head in his own mark of respect, following the siege that has deeply shocked not only Sydney but the nation. And just moments ago, the father of cafe manager Tory Johnson spoke here at the Floral Memorial.
There's love on earth. You can't get any better than that. Any easier than that. Peace and love come for free.
Yeah, you heard that right. That was a little giggle. He's smiling as he says all of this. Peace and love on earth. Peace and love come for free. I'll play that again.
Johnson spoke here at the Floral Memorial.
There's love on earth. You can't get any better than that. Any easier than that. Peace and love come for free. This is special to see it. Everything's
very
incredible.
powerful just for the family.
Very moving moment, and we thank everybody for supporting us
through this terrible time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so there you go. There's a little giggle. Now, a giggle in and of itself isn't proof of anything, but when you see him do that on 2 different clips, like, he looks very lighthearted. He's talking about love and peace a couple of days after his son was supposedly brutally murdered in a siege that made worldwide news. Calm, collected, talking about peace and love and forgiveness and all of these nonsense things. Nonsense in the context of what had supposedly happened. Making jokes and laughing. There's another clip which I won't show right now, but be part of a video that I'm putting together, where he starts saying that he wants to see flowers all the way down Martin Place. Let it roll, he says. He actually says, let it roll. He starts laughing with a big grin on his face. Come on.
Oh, you can't. And for other things, you know, we had a look before last week's episode, before we went on the air, about some photos that were taken, and they look like tourist photos. They're all standing there laughing, getting photos at Martin Place, you know, with it all in the background and with big smiles on their face, and you're thinking, you know, you just are reminiscent of Robbie Parker, where he was laughing, and it's the exact same thing if you want to translate it from one event to another. This so-called father is the Robbie Parker of this staged event, because numerous times again he's seen not looking like someone who's just lost one of their children, but more like someone who's just on camera to be paid to be there, Johnno.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, he is the Robbie Parker of this event for my money. The two photos that first woke me after him, I saw about a week or so ago, and these were just still photos, one from the Daily Telegraph, I believe, and another one from a Jewish newspaper, for some reason, of him smiling and making hand signals, these weird two-fingered hand signals, as is what I think is his daughter or Tori's sister. I'm not too sure, but I think that's who she is, how she fits in the narrative. Also smiling and giving that same two-fingered hand signal as they're standing amongst members of that Chabad Lubavitch. That's the group of fedora-wearing Jewish people who have those massive menorahs that they light all over the world. You know, those 30-foot menorahs. You know, the menorah, the Jewish candle with, I think, 7 or 9 candles. They're Chabad Lubavitch are the ones who put them all around the world in big cities, these big 10-meter, 30-foot menorahs, and they light them everywhere. Well, for some reason, this Tory Johnson guy is standing amongst them doing these weird hand signals, as is the girl in the story, smiling a couple days after his son or their relative was supposedly shot. I mean, it really does beg a belief that people could see that in isolation and not want to ask questions, which is why I say this could be, like you said, this could be the smoking gun.
Absolutely. And I've seen those people in Brisbane. They normally do that every year. And if Revolt Begins Now is listening to this still, I saw him in the comments before. He knows that as well. He's seen them in Brisbane. And yeah, it's just, at that point, I hadn't seen the extent of more towards the actors and everything. I was more concentrated on who benefits and the media and whatnot. And by that point, when I was shown all of this, especially the father, I just couldn't believe that this was happening. You know, that there were photos like this. You thought that maybe they would have learnt from Sandy Hook, but obviously not.
No, you would have thought so. Now, just in the comments box while you were chatting there, Ethan, I just saw an update from Silver Slave saying that there's another Malaysian airline missing over Indonesia. I'm just looking at this now live on Sky News. Air Asia says missing jet hit by bad weather. Air Asia says the pilot of the flight that went missing between Indonesia and Singapore had requested deviation from its flight path because of bad weather. Quote, the aircraft was requesting deviation due to en route weather. The Malaysia-based carrier said in a statement posted on its Facebook page, the plane with 162 people on board has gone missing on its way from Indonesia to Singapore in the third major incident to affect a Malaysian carrier this year, end quote. What on earth?
Yeah, it come up as a little news blurb just before we went live. I saw it in the background on the TV here where I am, and obviously I didn't have the details at the time to speak about it, but it's very, you know, and we all have our opinions about the Malaysian flights, but what is the go with it always being from Malaysia? Does this company have someone that's out to get them something in high places? I mean, I don't know what the hell's happening, but
I tell you what, Ethan, I have a theory about that, and I did discuss it briefly when I was on the Max Resistance Roundtable last week. I'll tell you what we'll do at the end of this show. Do you want to we'll have a quick discussion about that, because, hey, as we're on air, this story is breaking, so this will be one of our Sydney Siege episodes, but also could be one of our, third missing plane episodes as well. So what do you say we come back to that one at the end of the episode?
No worries.
All right, so sorry to the audience. I thought that was incredible. Again, this is why we love having the live chat, because we got the audience, they can fill us in. I didn't know about that, so thanks to Silver Slaver. I appreciate the link. That's incredible stuff. Now, we were talking about Tory Johnson, the father, and he's smiling and carrying his theatrics, and that was, of course, the final sub-segment that we wanted to discuss before we get into a general chat. Now, Ethan, before we get into the general chat, I wanted to do something a little bit more fun than than usual. Now, you are allowed to play 1 or 2 minutes of a film if it's for the purpose of reviewing or critiquing or whatever. But here's the thing. YouTube are shutting down and censoring most people who talk about the Sydney Siege, and that was how Jeff C lost his channel. And I don't want to give those guys any excuse to try and shut us down. So I'm not going to play a clip from the film in question. But there's what we're going to do instead, Ethan. If you're going to help me out here, I want you to give the backing music as I read out this dialogue. So here's what happened. There's a movie scene. I'm going to discuss why it's important in a minute. But we're going to recreate that movie scene. I'm going to read the dialogue, but you're going to provide the backing music. So if you could just, for me, mimic the sound that you're about to hear. What have I done here? Just hold on 1 minute.
You and your ideas, Johnno.
Yeah, for the listeners who are new, about 2 months ago, we discussed the whole Ukraine incident, and I got Lindsay, who's one of our regular guests, one of our regular panelists, rather, and Ethan to read out a dialogue between Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State for the US, and Leon Panetta, the two who plotted to install Arsenal Yatsenyuk in Ukraine before, of course, it happened. Let's have a look. Just bear with me here. I'll tell you what, Ethan, give me your thoughts on some of the stuff that's happening while I get this music up, because this is important.
Some of the thoughts on
the Sydney siege, just a general discussion.
No worries. Well, it seems my thoughts are from the beginning that this is going to be a moment where we look back and say that that was the catalyst that started all of this. I think at the moment, obviously, we can tear apart the story. We can speak about some of the inconsistencies associated with it. But I don't think it's going to be until later down the track where we can look back and then it finally dawns on us and we can say, that's when this started. What this is, I don't know what that will come down later down the track. We've got many different options we spoke about in a lot of shows, but I think this is the catalyst for something because it's a really important issue and it's been rammed down our throats here in Australia, and it's only the beginning for something. That's my overall thoughts of
that's
some
good.
of the agendas. Yeah.
Perfectly timed. Well, I've got the music ready, so just listen to a few seconds of this, and then I'll just need you to recreate the bass line and the percussion or whatever. All right, just check this out. You familiar with that song? That's Clubbed to Death by Rob Dugan. And if you could just recreate that duk duk chick sound, I'm going to read out a dialogue from a film, and I really haven't set this segment up very well. So to the audience at home, I apologise. This will all make sense in a little while. So if you could just give me that backing.
At least I don't have to pronounce any names.
If you could just give me that backing music, I'm going to read out a very important monologue from a film. Okay, you ready?
All right. All right, here I go.
It's more of a duk duk chick, duk chick, duk duk chick. Can you give me one of those? Yeah, that'll do. This is a system. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. I tell you what, I have to apologise to the listeners for that. In my head, that was a lot funnier than it was in real life. But hey, that dialogue that I read out, and I tell you what, I'll read it out really quick without the fantastic backing that Ethan just offered.
Fantastic.
I'll read this out, and then I'll see if any of the audience in the live chat can tell me what film this is from. This is a quote. This is a system. The system is our enemy, but when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. And, quote, Ethan, can you tell me what film that's from?
If I'm not mistaken, isn't that the Matrix film?
Yeah, it is. It's The Matrix, that's right. Now, that particular scene is, I think, about halfway through the film. I haven't seen The Matrix for more than 10 years. I have to go back and watch it. I'll probably watch it tonight because of something that I discovered earlier today. And that is that scene was the red dress woman scene. That's the scene where Morpheus is explaining the Matrix to Neo, and he gets distracted by the woman in the red dress. And that happens in front of a fountain. Now, would you like to guess where that scene was shot?
Tell me, Johnno.
Martin Place, Sydney.
Wow. Is that for real?
No word of a lie. If you're listening to this and you're at a computer right now, just check out on Google Maps Martin Place and Pitt Street, P-I-T-T, P for Peter, I-T-T for Tom, Martin Place and Pitt Street, look at the fountain, and then just finds a screenshot of the red dress woman from The Matrix. It's the exact same fountain. That's where that scene was shot. And now, I should have given that really as the primer before reading out the monologue, but I'll read this out one more time, because when I say that the rabbit hole goes deep, this is what I'm talking about. This is Morpheus to Neo. The Matrix is a system. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it.
Wow.
Has a truer word ever been spoken?
That's unbelievable. Martin Place. Wow. I had no idea about that, and I'm a big fan of the Matrix films myself.
Well, there you go, my friend. 1999, they shot that film, parts of it in Sydney, and the red dress woman scene where Morpheus explains to Neo what you and I and most of our listeners know, that people who are plugged in aren't on our side until they're unplugged. That's the scene where it happens. And now, some people will, the falsers, because of course they call us truthers, the falsers will say, oh, that's just a coincidence.
It's a pretty big coincidence.
But they will say that about anything. Anything. Yeah. Those same falsers will be telling us later tonight, oh, a third plane missing from Malaysia? That's just a coincidence.
Oh, goodness. No, the Matrix films do resonate more towards reality. The more that you watch it, I mean, you can watch it on two different levels. You can watch it on the surface level and just watch a good movie, or you can actually look at it on another level and actually see that there's actual programming behind it, where they're actually just explaining the system which we live in, essentially, when you actually break it down and look at it on a level. So to actually take the Matrix, which a lot of people in this movement refer to in terms of talking about the deception and the false reality that's been structured around us, and then relate it to how that scene was filmed at the same place the Sydney sieges happened. If people want to say that's a coincidence, that's a very big coincidence, at best. I can't believe it.
Just while I was saying that, Red Pill Revolution in the live chat has said that he did a video about the Matrix Sydney connection. Good to have you in the chat room, by the way, Red Pill. Good to see you. I hadn't seen that video. The person, I have to give a shout out to a guy called Dutch Since, DUTCHSINSE. I'd never heard of this guy before the Sydney siege, but he's put out a couple of really good videos about it. And so I can't vouch for all of his work, but his work on the Sydney siege is really good. He has like 90,000 subscribers. I don't know how I'd never heard of him, but he has a really cool video about this, which I'll link to in the info box. So I can't take credit for that one. And sorry, Red Pill, mate, I don't think you can take credit for that one either. I think that one, at least as far as I can tell, goes to Dutch Since. And yeah, when I found that one out, Ethan, I have to say, I mean, you and I, when we do this Australian Roundtable, we try and stick to the news stories and just quote from the mainstream press and point out the things that they're saying that are false and all the rest of it. We generally don't go too far down the rabbit hole, but this is our last show for the year. It's the festive season. I've spent half of the last week, enjoying myself on one or two Christmas shandies, so I think we can afford to be a little bit less structured than we normally are and just discuss some of the aspects of the rabbit hole, given that this is the end of the year show, and really, when you see coincidences like that one, how can you not begin to wonder?
Yeah, and I'm subscribed to Dutch Since, actually, and General Maddox from Rooney's Australia shares a lot of his work, and relating to he does more about earthquakes and movement on the Earth's surface. He reports on about things that are happening all over the world, but I'll definitely have to go check that video out, because that's an unbelievable coincidence. And we say we don't get into it online much, talking about some of those things. We like to keep it more of a structured, more sort of factual basis, but I mean, it's impossible for you to not to mention that, just to put the icing on the cake about just how far this deception goes, and most people don't even know that.
Yeah, most people are completely unaware, and again, I haven't seen the movie The Matrix. I literally haven't seen it for more than 10 years. So when I saw that Dutch Since video, I had to go back and try and find which scene he was talking about. Fortunately, there was a 1-minute clip on YouTube which I watched, and So, I really don't remember much of the film, but the basic idea that people are plugged in, that's an idea that, has never really left my mind. And that's one of the amazing things that you can do, especially with the audio-visual medium, is you can just plant seeds in people's heads, which is why when I see people, especially now, again, I don't want to use the word movement, but people who do the kind of work that we do here in other countries, from time to time you see them getting despondent or afraid that people aren't waking up fast enough or all the rest of it. I come up from a completely different perspective, which is, hey, if you can just get one good idea to spread to one good person, chances are they're going to spread the idea too, and that's all it takes. If we all just can spread one good idea just to one person, that only has to happen once for each person, and everything changes. And that film, The Matrix, like I said, I haven't seen it, but that idea that people are plugged in, that's an idea that they've managed to spread through the film. And I can see, even if this is just a little coincidence, that scene, a key scene from a key film, was filmed at the exact same place as this so-called siege. Even if that is a coincidence, that's going to be a way that we can get people to potentially open their mind up to the idea that, hey, maybe we can't be believing in coincidences anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And just to speak about breaking news, Johnno, I'm just having a browse here on social media, because obviously we're doing this on the net at the moment, and something that's trending right now at the moment is Grant Denyer, who is obviously the host of Family Feud on one of the big networks here. And the title of the article is Grant Denyer had close encounter with Sydney siege gunman man Haran Monis. Grant Denyer came face-to-face with man Haran Monis long before the gunman held 17 people hostage on the doorstep of former Sunrise Weatherman's old workplace. Denyer was horrified when he watched the footage of the Lindt Siege Cafe. Not only was it unfolding across the road from Channel 7's studio where his former colleagues looked on, but Denyer soon realised he also knew the man behind the gun. The Family Feud host said he regularly felt harassed by Monis when Denyer and his wife were living in Sydney's Chinatown. So it goes on to say, and I'm just reading this at the first time seeing this, saying that he used to see him on the street corners all the time, ranting, some of his beliefs that he's been known to do, covered on the media, but it's just saying that he was continuously harassed by man Haran Monis, and even to today, they're making up these stories to just continuously push the narrative of man Haran Monis. And
Yeah,
that's just come up now.
I actually happened to see that article about Grant Denyer this morning, and what I noticed was that in the same article where he's talking about, I used to have to put myself in front of my wife near man Haran Monis, and he always had a bad vibe. In the same article, he then goes on to dismiss the rumours that he and his wife are addicted to ice, to methamphetamines. So somehow, seriously, read the article. That's the same one that I read this morning, I'm sure of it. The second half of the article is dedicated to him quashing rumours about methamphetamine use. And then he says that he decided not to press defamation charges against the magazine that ran that story because he didn't want to add fuel to the fire. But generally speaking, if you're a high-profile celebrity and someone defames you, especially if they accuse you of doing drugs and you know that they're lying, you're going to take them to court. If you don't take them to court, maybe people are going to surmise that there's some legitimacy to the claims. And that's what really gets me about all of these news presenters. People trust them. These news presenters are in people's lounge rooms and kitchens every night, smiling and looking happy and pretending like they care. But these people are just looking at a camera, they're looking at a teleprompter, they're reading lines that someone else wrote. Their entire job is to smile and to pretend to you that they're your friend. They don't give a stuff about you. They lead different lifestyles to you. And look, whether this isn't about Grant Denyer specifically, this is about the media in general. If you know anything about them, you know that these people are doing some of the best drugs that money can buy because they've got the money and the connections to buy them. And yet they'll sit there with their stupid fake smiles or their fake tears. They'll pretend that they're your friend, and they'll tell you why guns are bad, drugs are bad, whatever. These people are shysters. They're prostitutes. I can't stand any of them. And Grant Denyer, I don't care how nice a smile he has. He's just the same as the rest of them. If man Haran Monis was real, I wish man Haran Monis had taken Grant Denyer out.
That's deep. But I am reading the exact same article, and I can see why I didn't see it this morning. It's because it's on the Courier Mail website, and I'd rather throw up everywhere than go on that. But I've seen the article, but it's just trending now, so just more exaggeration, more pushing of the man Haran Monis narrative, and as the article, as you said, gets into it, it just sideways off of that and doesn't even talk about man Haran Monis. It's just once again to put the image of the boogeyman into the people's mind.
Yeah, and look, we don't know who wrote that article. It is possible that someone just called Grant Denyer up, asked his opinion, and then chucked it into the article. That is possible. What seems more likely to me is that his publicist or his press agent has tried to use the Manharan Monis incident as a way to get his rebuking of the methamphetamine claims, as a way to make people listen to him rebuke the methamphetamines, talk about Manharan Monis. In other words, just to use this incident for their own self-publication. That's what seems more likely to me. Again, I can't prove that. But that's what I would infer.
Yeah, no, definitely. That definitely would be the case. It's more likely than any of the other scenarios. But yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up because I just saw it just scrolling here. It's just come up that Manharan Monis is once again in the media, and it's with rubbish stories like this on the rubbish Courier Mail website, and it's just you're just being bombarded with it all the time. Even when you think it's over, it just continuously comes up, and they need to do that to continuously push the narrative, and it's revolting.
Oh yeah, and unless we completely bust this wide open, which I suspect we're going to, not just you and me, but other people around the world have woken up to this scam already. If we were to bust this, they probably won't go down the path, but their intended path is to use this incident again and again and again. And what was interesting was how they immediately started using the Christmas, like they tied all of this into Christmas. Of course, supposedly that black Muslim flag was put above the lint thing saying Merry Christmas. Then when Tony Abbott gave his first press speech about it, there was a Christmas tree in the background. That Catherine Chi interview that I played earlier, the girl who was supposed to work there but wasn't even there, but they interviewed her anyway and used her to build the narrative. In that same interview, there was a Christmas tree in the background there. And that's not by accident. When they frame these scenes, they frame them intentionally. They've intentionally filmed her with a Christmas tree in the background. And then, of course, the carols in the domain, which for our non-Australian listeners, I don't know if this is a tradition elsewhere, hopefully not, but there's this sick tradition here in Australia where one of the commercial broadcasters has a Christmas carols thing. It's like one of the biggest Christmas carols in Australia, probably the biggest one, I don't know. And they broadcast it with all of the personalities from the same breakfast TV shows that are part of this whole staged event. So the Natalie Barrs and the David Koshes and all the rest of those paid actors, they're all part of the production of this Carols in the Domain thing, and they always are. But on this particular year, who were they paying tribute to? The victims of the Sydney siege. So what they've done is they've completely hijacked Christmas. I mean, Christmas has already been hijacked, but for argument's sake, let's pretend that's not the case. They've now taken Christmas and re-hijacked it and repackaged it with the Sydney siege thing. So you better believe that next year and the year after, when it approaches Christmas, they'll be ramping up the Sydney siege propaganda. No doubt about it.
Absolutely. And yeah, right off the bat with that Carols in the Domain broadcast, it was straight off the bat. And we've spoke about on other examples talking about, for example, David Cameron's speech, where before he gets into talking about where he wants to get rid of any critical thinkers to the system, essentially what he's saying, he has to put the emotional response at the start. So speaking about ISIS and the KKK and all of these language key indicators that can resonate in the people's minds, this is the same thing that happened at this Carols in the Domain thing, because right off the bat, they were playing sad songs with pictures and of the flowers and everything straight off the bat, and then saying, now we can rebuild from this and we're going to enjoy Christmas for those that aren't here. And it was really just revolting to watch, because it was just, it just did my head in. The whole week did my head in, and that's why I once again have to give kudos to you, Johnno, for going through the media coverage once again to try and find all of these clips and cut them up for your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I tell you what, it is a frustrating process to go through looking at all of the coverage, but at the same time, it's exciting because you can see they have left so much blatant evidence that this was staged. I mean, there's so much. It's not one thing, it's not two things. I've only covered a fraction of it in today's show. There's so much more to it, and I think when I finally get a chance to put all of this together into one solid piece of evidence, it'll be indisputable. The only people who will try and reject it or try and close their minds off to it are the people who are never going to wake up anyway. And that's the point I always make. It's not about waking everyone up. You're never going to be able to. Some people are so conditioned, they're so plugged into the system, like Morpheus says, that they're going to fight to defend it. They're never going to join us on the side of common sense. Never in a million years. But you don't have to get all of them. You only need a small portion of people to wake up to what's going on, and everything changes. And actually, that's what I think is happening right now. They're getting sloppy. They're doing a psyop, like a new psyop, week after week. I mean, just in the last couple of weeks since this Sydney siege thing, there's been a couple of things happen, even one in Australia. I don't know if you saw that. mum who allegedly murdered her 8 kids, but I haven't had a lot of time to go into that. But I did notice they're already saying they're going to demolish the house, and whenever they demolish the house straight away, or whenever they start covering the evidence up straight away, there's the first red flag. But I haven't even had time to look into any of that because I've been so busy covering the Sydney siege. Meanwhile, you've got that supposed execution-style murder of 2 police in America, which is just part of the same meme of pushing the idea of it's us against them. Get the police to hate the people, get the people to hate the police, try and drive a fracture between the two of them. Part of that same narrative. Like, I haven't had time to look into that one far, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's a psyop. I haven't had time to look into it because I've been so busy with this siege. They're just pulling off psyop after psyop after psyop, and I think that's because they're in a rush. I think it's because they know they're running out of time. I think it's because, thanks to the internet, the word is getting out there. People are realizing, people are waking up. I mean, I mentioned Dutch, since you say you've already heard of him. He does a video on the Sydney siege. The regular people like GFC, Red Pill, they're doing their videos. More and more people are doing videos, and it's the point I always make to people. You and I do this show. Anyone can do a show like this. Anyone can make videos. The more of us who do, the harder it's going to be for these people when they try and shut us down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they're just continuously doing this, and it's even, we haven't even spoken. I've got a whole piece that I want to do on a future episode talking about the North Korea supposedly hacking Sony incident, another blatant false flag attack to try and censor and control the internet. It's just unbelievable how much stuff is happening. And again, as you've said, it's because, in your estimation and in mine, that something's coming, they really need to ramp all of this up, and everything has just happened, especially in the last, I've been in this movement for a long time now, and especially in Australian alternative media, and things have definitely not been going this quick in terms of just psyop after psyop after psyop within a little tiny frame of, a month, a couple of months, as we've talking about on the last episode, how much has happened since we've started this broadcast, which is only, 12, 13 weeks. How much has happened within that? I don't think I've ever seen it escalate this quick, and it's because I believe, something's coming, and they either feel like they're in trouble or the end game is coming.
Oh, they know that something's coming. There's no doubt in my mind that they know that something's coming, and a lot of us are waking up to the fact that something's coming, and they're running out of time. That's what I honestly believe is happening. Speaking of which, so are we. We normally do a 90-minute show, Ethan. Are you happy to go to 2 hours? Normally, you have to obviously catch a train back home, and we can't finish too late to accommodate you getting back. But since we're doing this from the comforts of our houses this time, doing this live, are you happy to go to 2 hours? Because there's more to talk about.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Just check your chat box on the side there on the Google Hangout. There was a questioner as well who asked, is GFC coming on the show? Look, he was supposed to. I haven't heard from him since yesterday. It doesn't look as though he's going to be able to join us today. If he comes late, that'll be fantastic, but if not, I'm sure we'll get him on another time. For the time being, it's just Ethan and I. Now, there was one more clip that I wanted to show to the listeners. I wanted the listeners to hear. Of course, last week, Ethan, we really did structure the episode, I think, pretty well, if I can say so. We went through the background to what happened on Monday. We went through what happened on the Monday, what we think is going to happen as a result. We gave the whole context to all of this. So if someone is listening to this episode for the first time and they're wondering how you and I can be so confident that this was a staged event, that the media is lying, you really need to go back to episode 11 of the Australian Roundtable, where we give you the full contextual background to all of this. It's clearly part of a much bigger agenda. That's why I'm so confident of it. Check out episode 11 to get all the background to that. We basically gave the foundation last week, Ethan. This week I want to talk more about what it is that they're trying to do with an actual practical example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little clip. This was from, let me see here, December 19, so just a few days after the incident. This is from the Channel 7 News. I wonder if you've seen this one. This is just a 2-minute clip, so listeners, bear with us. This is called High-Tech Security Camera Trial.
A new 360-degree surveillance camera with facial recognition and tracking ability is being trialled in the city, but civil libertarians are concerned about how it could be used. This security camera could become a common fixture around Adelaide. I think we're being watched anyway.
I've got nothing to hide, or I'm not ashamed of anything.
The long-range camera has been set up by local company Fort Knox Security in Victoria Square. It has 6 fixed cameras and a larger one that can track people up to 2 kilometres away. The system has facial recognition technology and can identify vehicles by their number plates.
I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It's probably better for security.
I think it's more of a safety thing than anything else.
The technology is already used around the world and can cross-check persons of interest against criminal databases in real time. But civil libertarians are concerned about privacy.
It's part of surveillance by the state. We don't know whether there's any protections in place for people's privacy, who collects it, how it's stored and who looks at it.
The state government promised a similar facial recognition system before the March election. Megan Roberts, 7 News.
Ethan, what do you think of that?
I remember when this was in its original planning stages. I can't remember the exact time period, but I remember reporting and hearing something on this speaking about that. They also had similar plans for Brisbane as well. I just think it's just another extreme precaution that in the name of supposed security, that the surveillance state and the Orwellian nightmare that we currently live in is just going to increase even more. And we spoke about the second wave of anti-terrorism legislation, how they're going to use that to use iris scanning and fingerprinting at airports as well to try and get prevent people from leaving the country to so-called conflict zones. And the surveillance state is just increasing on the daily, and that's why I did an article on tottnews.com speaking about how that and the draconian laws are increasing, and every single day Australia is just more and more becoming just this nightmare to live in, and it's expanding on a global level as well, and we're the testing ground, in my opinion. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, in a lot of ways we are the testing ground, and of course we are disarmed for the most part. So when they want to pull off a complete psyop like they did at the Lint Cafe, they've got more chance of getting away with it, because who's walking past with a gun to stop him? Nobody. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they can get away with that kind of thing. That segment that I just played you was from the 7 News. Now that was in Adelaide, which is I think our smallest mainland major city. So they're kind of using Adelaide as their test case within the test case. And when you watch the segment, I will upload all of this, all the stuff that I talk about, all of this will eventually get uploaded to my channel, but I've just been flat out cataloging all of the stuff to then do a big mass upload later. And when I do upload it, it'll probably be to Zeekly rather than to YouTube, because I suspect YouTube are going to try and shut us down. But that's another discussion for another time. In the meantime, just that clip that I showed you, they show on the screen a camera with 3 full 60 rotation. It has 6 little cameras that are just fixed. Then the one big one up top, it literally looks like something out of like a technologically advanced 1984. It's incredible. They show footage of it scanning people's faces from a distance. And then what do? They vox pop 4 people, and what do the 4 people say? And you know what? It's worth playing this one again, just so now that I've pointed it out to you, listen to the 4 people that they vox pop. Check this out.
Is being trialled in the city, but civil libertarians are concerned about how it could be used. This security camera could become a common fixture.
It seriously looks scary. You have to see it.
Being watched anyway.
I think we're being watched anyway is the first person. This is the second.
I've got nothing to hide.
So the first one says, I think we're being watched anyway. In other words, oh, it's no problem. I don't care that there are these big cameras that can see me from 2 kilometers away being installed all over my city. The second person says, I've got nothing to hide, as in, well, only people who have something to hide should fear these cameras. Then check out what the third person says.
Play.
I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It's probably better for security.
I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It's probably better for security, so that's 3 from 3. And then this is the 4th one.
I think it's more of a safety thing than anything else.
I think it's more of a safety thing than anything else. So all 4 of the people who are supposedly vox popped are very much pro these cameras on their streets, and the average viewer at home is supposed to believe that those 4 are representative of all the people who were vox popped. What a load of nonsense.
And it's the same thing that we mentioned before with the tweets on television, getting the exact same thing to push the agenda. It happens on all levels, and the people are just going to buy it. And it's the same. It's the same recurring nonsense talking about, well, if you've got nothing to hide, then it shouldn't concern you. It's not about that. It's about the privacy of us to not end up in an Orwellian state, which we're already in. We're already in it. And you know me, Johnno, surveillance is more of a specialty in my areas, and especially talking about Australian security organisations and the intelligence organisations that are spying on us at the moment. And we're already living in a police state, and people are just giving their rights up just so easily. And now this is another clip to just escalate it even further. And most people are going to sit at home and then they're going to say, well, just like the experiments you talked about, if the first 4 people answer B and the answer's A, most of them are going to answer B because they don't want to go against what they think is representative of the majority, which it's not.
Exactly right. And that's why I think getting a basic understanding of certain things to do with crowd psychology and just basic psychological studies is so important for anyone who wants to understand how the system can be the way it is. Because when you try and say to someone, hey, you know that they're using the TV to fool most of us into believing nonsense, most people have trouble believing that for a couple of reasons. And one of them is, well, hold on, how could they fool so many people? Well, that's the whole point. They depend on fooling so many people. This whole sham system depends on the majority of people believing it, which is why they put so much effort into getting people to believe it. And those ASH experiments that I referenced earlier, that you just referenced now, they're very straightforward experiments. You take a person, you put them in a room with 5 other people, you tell them that they're all being tested, all their eyes are being tested, match up one line with another line on the wall. It's easy, A, B, or C. What's A? What's question 1? A. Everyone says A, you say A, it's easy. Question 2, what is it? You can clearly say it's B. Everyone says B, so you say B. Gets to question 6 or 7, you think it's clearly B. The first person says C, the second person says C, the third and the fourth all say C. What do you say? Most people will say, oh, well, I would still say the correct thing. I mean, I wouldn't just change my mind because of people. Well, you might say that, but they've done this study time and again, and every time it finds that up to 3/4 of people will give the false answer at least once. Such is the power of crowd psychology. And these people understand that, which is why when they're putting out their propaganda, which is all the nightly news is, it is just propaganda, nothing but. That's why they'll give you the vox pop of 4 people who are all supporting this thing with different nonsense reasons, because the plan is that the average sheeple at home will watch it, they'll internalize it, they'll go along with it. And so if people like you and me can see that it's nonsense, they don't really care so much because they only need the majority of people to believe this. But this is where the internet is so powerful, because now people like you and me can get together online. We can hook up with people in other parts of the world and discuss this. There's this big opening that's happening. People can actually discuss these things when in the past they couldn't, which is why I think these people are in such a rush and they're getting so sloppy, is because too many people are waking up to the scam.
Absolutely. And I don't think it is a representation of the majority anymore. I think most people, if not are awake, they do generally just question the system. Most people I ask say, you say, what do you think of the government? Well, they're obviously out for themselves, they're greedy and whatnot. So people are generally questioning of the system. But still, the power of the media and the power of influence over people is to have just the majority on the screen, what people think of the majority, have 1 or 2 people maybe questioning this story, get the worst parts of their interview and put them in just to juxtapositioning, to accentuate the people that support your agenda while demonizing the ones that don't support your agenda. And it's just the same thing. It goes to the highest levels at the top, a select group of people that are in control of all facets of our lives. Their sick and twisted agendas and the way that they view the world can resonate down a whole pyramid scheme to affect the general public. It's a small minority that can control the masses. And it's the same with the TV now, because I don't believe that the masses are completely asleep anymore.
Yeah, if you control the television and the education institutions, then you control the minds of the masses. It's a massive power that you have. The problem is the internet is giving us an alternate method to discuss, and the truth is always far more powerful than falsities. The falsity is going to be propagated so long as you have complete control of the message. They've lost control of the message because we have the internet. That's why this is so important. And Daniel Martinelli in the live chat box has said, surely the media has finally set the bar too low. Yes, I agree 100%. I think this Sydney siege is going to be a game changer because there is a mountain of evidence that it's all nonsense. And that's why I've been working on it so much. As soon as I started going back, looking over the live recordings the next day and into the couple of days after that, I was just stunned by how blatant this whole thing is. And I found myself thinking, this really could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm not saying I'm getting my hopes up too high, and I'm not saying that any video that I make is going to necessarily change anything, but when I see more and more people making videos exposing this, looking at the falsities that have been propagated, like last week we looked at how they changed their story in the space of one bulletin from, oh, we had to negotiate to get back in 3 hours later, to, oh, no, they never made us leave the building. I mean, they're lying within the space of one bulletin. They've really been sloppy here, and I think it could be their undoing.
That's right, and the narratives that they are pushing are starting to contradict each other. And Daniel, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier, with the example of pushing militarized police while trying to tell us guns are bad. They're contradicting themselves, and their stories are really setting the bar too low. But that's why they need to continuously program. It needs to continuously, just with that Grant Denyer article I mentioned, had nothing to do with the Sydney siege other than the name Manhar and Monas, but they need to continuously program it because their nonsense is getting too much now. So the programming needs to get stronger. You know, the pills, the blue pill needs to get stronger. It's just a continuous cycle, and that's why we've seen news increase every year in this country from the 20th century. You know, rather than just having one 6 p.m. bulletin, once they discovered they can make money off of it and make it an entertainment thing, and the way that it influences people, they increased it to now every half an hour there's news on TV, and there's a reason behind that. That's why the news is the same on every channel. It's because you need to continuously be programmed and be plugged into the matrix, or you're not going to buy this crap because it's getting more sloppy and worse every time.
Yeah, and I think one of the, because there's many hurdles involved in the process of what some people call waking up. I prefer the term deprogramming, but you can call it whatever you want, where you go from believing all the nonsense that they want you to believe to believing stuff that actually makes sense from a logical perspective. It's a long process with many hurdles, and one of the harder hurdles involved is realizing, wow, they actually use the TV to mentally manipulate people, to scare them, to put fear into them, to hurt them. And when I was watching the footage of all of these poor sheeple going to this flower memorial at Martin Place, a lot of these people who didn't know any of the people involved were in tears. I mean, the only tears that you see in these events are the ones from the unsuspecting, gullible masses who go and give flowers. You never see tears from the from the parents or from the family members or anything like that. No tears from them. Not even tears from the news presenters pretending to cry. The only real tears you see are from the gullible masses, and that's the really sad thing. People are being manipulated into feeling terrible about an event that just isn't real. That's how sick the people at the top are. That's how little respect they have for their fellow humans. They don't even think that we're humans. I mean, if you dig far enough, if you dig deep enough, you'll find out some of the people who are at the top, and you realize they don't actually think that you're a human. They think you're a cockroach. They think I'm a cockroach. They think we're all cockroaches. They can mentally manipulate us. They can install a police state. They can kill us if they have to. They don't care because they don't consider us to be at the same level as them. That's the sad reality. That's a hard hurdle to jump when you're going through this process. But once you jump it, everything else makes way more sense. All of a sudden, instead of saying, "What? How could they do that?" It's like, well, of course they would do that. They think we're cockroaches. How could they do that? You know, don't they have any morality? No, they don't, or at least they don't have your morality. They're not like you. Stop thinking, stop projecting your morality onto the people at the top. They don't have it. That's why they're at the top. That's why they're doing what they're doing. Sadly, yes, they will instigate an entire charade of an event and put thousands, maybe millions of people through mental anguish just to affect their agenda. You better believe they do it. They just did it.
Yeah, and you made a great point about, you know, trying to project it onto people that don't express empathy. That was the philosophy of Malcolm X as opposed to people like Martin Luther King and Gandhi, because they said to be peaceful and to not use violent resistance as a way to defend yourself is not the answer, because, you know, you can show them that you're better than them. But what Malcolm X was saying was that, and you know, you can think what you want about Malcolm X, it's the point that I'm trying to get to here, is that that won't work against them because they don't have the morality to care. They do not have the morality. They just enjoy it every time they knock you down. And it's not about trying to fight back in a way that tries to express humanity and express the very core foundations of what, you know, being a good person is on them, because they don't have that. They don't express empathy. So it's not going to work that way. And that's the message that people need to get across to themselves, is that they're different to you. There is a gap between us. And they see us literally as sheep. And it's a generational thing that's been brainwashed time and time again through thousands of years, maybe millions of years if you want to study some history. So you need to stop looking at them, as we've said in previous episodes. Firstly, the government as your friend that care for you. And then when you follow the rabbit hole down, realizing how deep it gets and how little they think of you. They literally think you're a speck of dust, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely they do. And the way I put it to people is, and now listen, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not promoting vegetarianism here on the show. That's a whole different topic. But if you think about it, most of us know that the meat that we eat comes from animals who didn't have the best of lives. Okay, most of us know that. Some of us buy, you know, free-range eggs instead of caged eggs, or some of us, you know, try and eat less meat either for health reasons or because we know where the meat comes from or whatever. But most of us do eat meat, or at least we know people who do eat meat. And we wouldn't eat it if it was human meat, but we will eat it if it's animals, because we consider the animals to be less important than humans. That's just the way that most people see the world. Well, that's exactly how the people at the top see it, except that the animals are you. The animals are your family. The animals are your friends. They don't consider you to be like them. Whether you like that or not, that's the reality. And once you understand this very important fact of the world, once you understand that, everything else starts to make a lot more sense.
Absolutely, because once you, as we said, once you expose just how rubbish this whole constructed reality is around us, you can see it just starts to fall apart and life starts to become more clearer, because this is not how things are supposed to be. And that's why free thinking, educated people like us need to get together and really need to form an alternative to say, hang on, we're not the minority anymore. This is not how things are supposed to be, and we're going to expose it for what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably a good time to mention, for those who aren't following the Mass Resistance Roundtable or the We'll Do It Live podcast, there has been a development in this entire community, if you like, over the last couple of months. And that is that a guy named Jeff Sisk has started an alternative to YouTube known as ZeeklyTV. Now, I noticed that Justice for Germans in the chat box said that it's hard to get the info out unless videos go viral because YouTube is suppressed and Reddit is suppressed. And I do agree with that. They do suppress these things. What Jeff Sisk of ZeeklyTV has done is start his own media platform similar to YouTube. You can upload your own videos, have your own channels, all the rest of it. And he says that he's not going to censor videos like they do on YouTube. In fact, in the last couple of weeks, especially because of the whole Sydney siege thing, a lot of people's channels have been getting shut down. And he was telling us on the Mass Resistance Roundtable last week, which was a terrific episode, by the way. If you haven't already heard it, go and check that out. I'll post a link in the info box. He was telling us that he had a lot more traffic come to his site as people are now starting to leave YouTube because of the censorship. And look, you can never know. I mean, Jeff sounded like a lovely dude, and he seems really on point. And I personally believe that he is on our side and could be a game changer. You can never know, you know, and people in this movement are smart enough to know to never give 100% trust to anybody, because, you know, 9 times out of 10, the people with power, you know, they'll pretend they care about you, and it turns out they don't. So you can never know. But Jeff Sisk came across as very likable. Sounded like he was doing this for the right reasons, and I personally plan to go to ZeeklyTV for that very reason. When I start uploading my videos about the Sydney siege hoax, they're going to get censored. There's no question about that. So to have ZeeklyTV as a backup could be a game changer. So if those of you who are out there are, you know, you're skeptical of YouTube and Reddit and all the rest of it, which you should be, that's fine. I understand that. Go and check out ZeeklyTV.com and upload a video and see for yourself. I don't know about you, Ethan, but I think this could be a game changer. Absolutely. And for a plug for myself, for those that are fed up with social media, which obviously was, you know, devised by the CIA and you know, companies that are controlled by the same people that control every facet of our lives. A couple guys I know started a website called Informed Planet, which is a social media alternative, and you can go to informedplanet.org. If you go to the TOTT News website, we have a banner down at the bottom because we're affiliated partners with informedplanet.org. It's just a social media network for informed people to go on, and they've got, you know, about 5,000 members now, and it's continuously growing every day, where people can actually get on and don't have censorship and can actually share things with people. So all of these alternative network, alternative media networks and everything that are starting up as alternatives to some of the major networks that we try to get our stuff across is absolutely fantastic. And I really think people need to support these sites and get involved, because community is the most important thing. Yeah, absolutely. And just because a community is online doesn't make it any less real. I've gotten to the point now where there are people who I follow online, not just in this movement, but other little movements that I keep tabs on, who I know better than I know my own neighbours. Now, that's sad that I don't know my neighbours that well, but the point is that this connection that the internet allows can be a true force for good. And when we see Facebook and Tinder and these other just mind-numbingly distracting and I think ultimately satanic tools, it's easy to think of the internet as being a bad thing, but it doesn't have to be. It's just that right now it's being used as a tool by many people for all the wrong reasons, but we still have it and we can still use it for the right reasons. And one of those right reasons is connecting with other people around the world who have similar opinions or are just able to question things like we can, and that's the power it's given us. So to all of you people listening to this live or listening, you know, on archive or whatever, if Ethan and I can catch up and discuss doing a show like this and then do it, we've got 30 live listeners as we speak right now. Last week's episode had 700 listeners. Why did this happen? Well, because there's an audience out there. There's people out there like us who want to discuss this stuff. If we can find that audience, you guys can find that audience. So like I always say, if you've ever wanted to start a podcast, if you've ever wanted to start making videos, now is the time for two very important reasons. One of them is that stuff is happening very quickly, and most of you guys know that. Things are heating up, and there's a new false flag seemingly every week, and there's a reason for that, and we believe, and I'm pretty confident, that's because something is just on the horizon. So now's the time to be discussing it, but also they're going to try and take the net away. So before they try it, while we've still got some semblance of freedom on the net, use that freedom. And to those of you who think, oh, I don't want to do that, I don't want to put my name on a list, I don't want to take the risk, the sad reality is that if what you're afraid of does come to pass, if they do suddenly flick a switch, shut the system down and come for us, they're already coming for you. If you've listened to this podcast, yeah, look, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I used to, now I don't. I think the whole Edward Snowden thing was a psyop to get people scared, to not want to voice their opinions because they're afraid of the state. I'm not afraid of the state anymore. But if you, and I don't think that switch is going to get flicked, but if they do flick that switch, you're already on the list, so don't worry about that. If you've got an opinion, voice it. If you want to make videos, start making them. Get onto us, get onto Ethan, we'll promote your stuff. And hey, in 3 months, we've got 360 subscribers. In 3 months, you could as well.
Absolutely. And as it's the end of the year, the end of the show, 2015 is going to be a big year. And we can predict that because, you know, it seems like everything is coming to a standpoint at this time. So we all need to get together. We all need to make a community. We all need to make our own channels. We really need to unite as a force. And let's make 2015 a big year for alternative media and whatever you want to call the movement. Let's really, you know, fight back against with like-minded people, spreading information, sharing ideas, and really just building a community that can combat the constructed reality around us. I think 2015 needs to be the year where we do that. Everything's going fantastically this year. We've gone, as I've said, I've been in alternative media for a long time in Australia. It's never been as big as it is. And to have all of these networks all around the world right now, we really need to come together and form a community where we can fight back against them.
Absolutely, and that's what we're doing right now. That's what the listeners are doing. All the guys in the live chat chatting. This is all part of it. You know, many drips fill the bucket. And I do know some people in this movement and similar ones where they get despondent because they don't see the change that they want happening quick enough. But you can be the change that you want to see. If you detest the people at the top of what they do, then stop buying their shit. You know what I mean? You don't have to go from buying lots of stuff to buying nothing tomorrow. You can do it over time. You can slowly reduce the amount of clothes that you're buying or the amount of bad food that you're buying. You can slowly start to increase the amount of food that you grow at home. If you notice that many people around you are sad or depressed, because, hey, who wouldn't be in this society, you can be the person who starts smiling at people and waving hello. And these little things, they might seem little and inconsequential, but you only need a small fraction of a small percentage of the population to start doing these things to really make change, and you can be the change you want to see. And since I started making a concerted effort to do that, my life has been a million times happier. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
I was never one of those poor dudes who you see on the train or on the bus on the way to work, and they look depressed. They look like they checked out a long time ago, and now they've just got 30, 40 years on this rock until it's all over. I was never like those. That's how a lot of them are. You know it. Yeah. I was never like one of those people, but at the same time, I was never truly happy. I hadn't really found what it was I wanted to do. Well, it turns out this is what I want to do. I want to be the change I want to see. I want to start making little changes to my life, helping other people make changes to their life. If they're making changes, get them on the show to talk about it. Being part of, like you said, Ethan, a community. Since I started doing that, man, I've been a million times happier. And if anyone was to ever ask me, hey, what do you recommend to be happy? It wouldn't be antidepressants from the complete sham psychiatry industry. It wouldn't be any of the TV shows that pretend like they're going to make you happy when all they do is depress you. It wouldn't be any of the crap that we normally give people to make them happy. It'd just be trying to do the right thing. And that's exactly what the show is. And anyone who would censor this show, you know exactly what their agenda is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And because the system that we live in is not a system that free humanity should have to live in, and that's why people are depressed, and people just hate, going to work, and people look forward to having one day off a year at Christmas time. It's absolutely ridiculous. But Daniel made a good point in the comments saying to download videos on keepvid.com, and I think I can speak on behalf of Johnno. Please do. All you have to do is put in our URL into keepvid.com, and you can download the video to your computer. We will have the audio up for download eventually once we get all of our networks set up where you can download the audio. But till then, in case we do get taken off, please, download the videos to your computer for any website like keepvid.com, and really build an archive. If you really like the show, spread it with your friends, because YouTube is unpredictable, and one day we could be here and one day we couldn't be. So that's another important point to make out, just as we finish the year off here and look forward to a big 2015, Johnno.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, mate. And you know that Jeff C., who was meant to join us today, looks like we won't be seeing him, which is a shame, but his channel got shut down by YouTube, and he had something like 700 videos up at the time, I think, from memory. And a lot of them are videos that I go back and watch every now and then for a laugh or to show to other people, whatever. And a couple of them I hadn't actually saved. Now, I'm sure Jeff has them on his hard drive, and we'll see him again, but I've essentially lost those videos because I took down his channel. They could do the same with this channel. They could do the same with any channel. So if you ever see a video that you like, whether it's ours or someone else's, download it to your hard drive. The more people who do that, the better. And I'll give you an example. About 2 weeks ago, I was hanging out with a guy who I like to chat about, geopolitical things, especially to do with the Ukraine and Russia, whatever. He's never been into the whole hoax thing, if you want to call it that, but he's been into following world politics. He knows we're being lied to about a lot of things. And I was at his place, and he wanted me to watch a video by, I think it was Webster Tarpley. So I watched it. I liked it. Thought it was good. I said, hey, I've just watched that video. Let me show you a video. And I showed him Red Pill's al-Baghdadi video. He's a smart terrorist. It's basically where Red Pill just, satirizes the Fox News media, and it always makes me laugh. I showed that to this guy, and within 5 to 10 minutes, he'd gone from thinking that people who think there are hoaxes have gone too far down this rabbit hole to wanting to go further down the rabbit hole himself. That's the difference that these things can make, and that's exactly why they want to censor this stuff. Because if you can make people laugh at how ridiculous the news is, you're using a very powerful tool, which is laughter, with another very powerful thing, which is the truth. You put those two together, and you can help people wake up if that's what you want to do, and that's why they're trying to censor us, Ethan.
That's exactly right. I think you hit the nail right in the head there, Johnno.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, mate. We've got 10 minutes left, not just on this episode, but for the year 2014. We started all of this, 4 months ago now. We got together and we said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, or I'm kind of thinking of doing that. Can we possibly make this work together? We've got the G20 coming up. We want to cover that. And at the time, I never could have predicted that so much would happen this year. I mean, I really thought G20 was going to be it, at least as far as Australia was concerned, and that was going to be our little claim to fame or thing that we do, which was to cover that. As it turned out, G20 was largely a non-event, at least insofar as comparisons to what happened in Canada a few years prior. We didn't see the Asian provocateurs, we didn't see the mass riots, we didn't see 1,000 arrests, anything like that. So in many ways, that was a non-starter. But just on the eve of Christmas, we've been handed this Sydney Siege hoaxathon.
Merry Christmas.
And, it's given us far too much to talk about, but we don't want to finish the year just talking about that. It's been a big year. Ethan, do you want to share with me and with the audience your thoughts on this year and where you see us headed?
Unbelievable year. Just to expand on what I said before, I think 2015 is going to be a massive year, not just for their continuous programming against us and continuously trying to suppress free humanity. I think it's going to be free humanity fighting back on a mass level. And I've thought that every year, but this year, just with the gain in the movement, as you may put it, it's just unbelievable. And I want to thank everyone that's tuned in from episode 1. We're just citizens, concerned citizens, free citizens, that anyone can do this as well. We're just here voicing our opinions, and I want to thank everyone that's tuned in, because 2014 was a big year. We had all of our most draconian laws here in Australia passed through the Senate and the House of Representatives. The third one is on the way, and who knows more after that. If you listened to our episode last week talking about how the Sydney Siege is going to be used to enforce even more draconian laws, we had everything. We had the false flags, we had ASIO raising the terror level to high, we had terrorism hysteria, raids, the G20 came to Brisbane. It was just a massive year, and this has only happened since the start of September. So who knows what's going to happen in 2015, Johnno?
Yeah, and 2014 was really the year that I went from questioning things and being happy to say that some events were clearly fake. I mean, Sandy Hook and Boston bombings, no person who looks at that is going to come away and think they're legitimate, right? But for the most part, I wouldn't have called myself a truther or anything like that. It was just something that I was interested in. But 2014, anybody with a functioning brain cell in their head has to be asking questions right now. In many ways, 2014 has been a good filter to really see, does this person that I'm talking to have the capacity to think? What do they think about? And I'll use an example that was really a big part of my process of deprogramming, was the Malaysia Airlines thing. Do you actually think a plane can disappear and nobody knows about it? Do you really believe that? Really? Yeah? Okay, cool. That's cool. I'm not going to try and change your mind, but I'm not going to talk to you about anything anymore. What is there to say to someone like that? It's such a good filter. 2014, yeah, there's been a lot of disaster, and like you said, all those laws have been passed, and the enemy is really revealing itself now. I agree with all that. That's all bad. But at the same time, there's so many silver linings to all of this. We now know what's coming. We know, like, they're not hiding it. We know exactly where we're headed. Those of us who are strong enough of moral fortitude to consider this and to realize this now know there's a battle on our hands. There's no more shying away from it. It's coming. We're in the middle of it. Next year, who knows what they're going to throw at us? I mean, just this year they threw that Elliot Roger false flag at us. What a load of nonsense. There was a Cassidy Stay one, a girl who just saw 6 or 7 people in her family get assassinated, execution style in front of her, and then she's out talking about Dumbledore, for Christ's sakes. You've got these shootings and the race riots going on in Ferguson. You've got all of this happening in America. Canada got hit as well with their Moncton shootings and the so-called, hit and run, which happened a few days before that. They're passing all of their laws, just like we're having here. Then here in Australia, we've got, obviously, this Sydney siege hoax, which is going to wake a lot of people up. I've got no doubt about it. And like I said, I've got videos in the pipeline that, I'm really proud of what I've put together so far, and I think the people are going to like what I have to show. That'll be done within a couple of weeks, I'm sure. As long as we don't get censored before then, or they don't come and steal my hard drive before then. So this has been and then you've got the planes that have gone missing.
Yeah, it's just
2 planes from the same company, and then we learned today a 3rd plane from the same country. And I remember when that second plane went down, and I was like, hold on, Malaysia Airlines, do you really think that this is a coincidence? And of course, a lot of the people are like, yeah, coincidence. And then I literally would say this to them, all right then, what if a 3rd plane from Malaysia Airlines went missing? Would you think that was a coincidence? Like, tease this idea out. At what point does it go from being a coincidence to something you should question? And for a lot of people, they couldn't answer that question because they could see how absurd it is to say, well, 3 would be a coincidence, well then 4. Like, they could see that there is some point where even they would have to question. And it's just that people like you and me are already at that point. 2 planes is enough for us to question. And then you get this 3rd one, Malaysia Airlines missing jet, as we go to air, or, the story developing as we go to air today. I mean, 2014... If this battle is won by the forces of good, which I believe it will be, I have faith that goodness is just ahead of us, we're on the horizon of it. If the forces of good win this massive battle that's taking place right now, we're going to look back at 2014 as one of the golden years of hoax.
That's right. And I think 2014 was the year of the line in the sand, where you decided which side you were on, because so much has happened, so much to test. Free humanity is what I like to call it, and it got to the point where you're either on this side or you're on that side, because the end game is coming. And we've spoken in previous episodes what that could be, whether the ISIS is going to escalate into Syria and it will result in a World War III incident, or whatever's coming. I think this year was the catalyst to put the line in the sand to say either you're on the side of free humanity or you're on the side of that. And being ignorant in the age of information is not an excuse either. If you're neutral, you're also on the side of the oppressor as well. And I think 2014 will be a year, as I said, that we look back and we won't realize it now, but we'll say that was the start of when this happened, and that was the catalyst that set it off. So I really think 2014 has been a big year, and it's been a pleasure to take the journey with you, Johnno, on this podcast.
I'll tell you what, it's been a lot of fun, mate. It's sad that Lindsay couldn't be here with us for our final show, but we know that he's caring for one of his family members. We appreciate all the effort that he's put in this year. And Lindsay, if you listen to us live, mate, thank you so much for all of what you've had to put input into the show. You've helped me think about things that I hadn't thought about before on certain topics that we probably don't discuss enough on this show, but that might be changing next year. Time will tell. So thank you so much to Lindsay. We've had one guest on during the year. That was Raja B. So many thanks to him for taking part on the show. Ethan, I can't thank you enough for all of your effort, mate. A lot of our listeners don't realise that we generally broadcast from my place here close to the city. You live a fair way out, so you've got to come all the way in for the show, because we normally do it, live in the studio. Then you've got to go all the way out. The amount of time that you've put into this show, you come with all your research. It's phenomenal stuff, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. So thank you so much for that, mate. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you, Johnno. Thanks for those words, and thank you for making the trip to come down to where we were that day and introduce yourself and say that you had an idea for a podcast, which I also did at the time. It just seems like everything aligned at the same time, where we've come together and we've done this podcast, and it's just gone to levels so far that I can't imagine, and it's going to go beyond. And thanks to the listeners tuning in for the final episode of the year. We did plan to have Jeff C on, but we also he didn't come through for certain reasons, and we had to restructure the show really at the last minute, and really just we're basically off the cuff today. But I think after 12, 13 episodes this year, I think it was good to just sit back and have a discussion and really reminisce on what's been a fantastic year for alternative media, not just in Australia but around the world, Johnno.
Yeah, you make an excellent point. And listen, I said earlier in the show that if Man Monis was real, I wish that he had got Grant Denyer. Obviously, I was being facetious. I don't wish harm. I really have to make this clear. I don't really wish harm upon anybody. I mean, in the ideal world, when this war is all said and done, the people who are on the wrong side, in my ideal world, they'd just be put on trial and asked to explain why they should be allowed to live on this planet anymore. And if they can't do so, then consequences follow that. But I don't genuinely wish harm upon anyone, not even people like Grant Denyer. I guess I was just channeling my inner Jeff C there and getting stuck into the media. Shame that Jeff couldn't make it today, but I will use that as a segue to round out the show now. If you've enjoyed this show but you've never checked out Mass Resistance Roundtable or the We'll Do It Live podcast, check those guys out because they do a show that's pretty similar to ours. Today we had a less structured format, which is more similar to what they do on their shows, and they always like to have a laugh and to laugh at the nonsense of the media. So if you've enjoyed this show and you haven't checked them out before, do check them out. I know that for their final show of the year, they're planning to do a big 2014 review of all of the hoaxes. And, I'm looking forward to seeing which one they give the title of the #1 hoax of 2014 because it's going to be tough to judge that one. So tune into those guys. They'll be on Wednesday night American time. That's Thursday morning Australian time, if I'm not mistaken. Just check out their website. They'll have all the information. And the Mass Resistance Roundtable, which is on the Tuesday night American time, Wednesday morning Australian time. Check those guys out. Ethan, before we before we round out the show, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the viewers?
No, just a plug for tottnews.com. We've got plenty of stuff coming in 2015. Really want to go full on with it. Some segments on the YouTube channel, monthly episodes of different ideas that we have, and obviously the documentary I spoke about on the last 2 episodes. We want to release the documentary speaking about how they're coming for free speech and it's coming quick, and just thanks for supporting everything that we do, and I hope that you can all make your own work, and I can't wait to see all of your videos, Johnno, and I'm just really happy with the place that we're in right now as a community, and it's only forward for me, mate.
Yeah, and look, people like you and myself, we're on what you might call the front lines. We're the ones that are putting our voices to this, putting the research in, whatever. But the only reason why we get to 380 subscribers or whatever it is because people out there are sharing what we're doing. And there's no amount of thanks that I can give that will convey how appreciative I am of what they're doing. So to all of the live listeners who are in the chat box right now, people like Jaden, who was supporters from the start, I really appreciate that. Justice for Germans has been there since the start. Green Man and Blah Blah Tuesday, and all the new people. I mean, we've had a lot of new people in the chat. Thanks to all of you guys for taking part in that. To all of the listeners, whether you're listening live or on an archive at a later date, this is why we're here. This is why I'm here. Anyway, I can't speak for Ethan. I'm here for you guys because I know that people want to hear this stuff. They want to talk about this stuff, and I'm just happy to make the contribution that I can. But mine is only one contribution, and every time you share this video, you're making your contribution. Every time you post a comment on our page, you're making your contribution. If you don't want to make videos yet, I understand that. It can take a while to gain that confidence. But in the meantime, every time you share the message about this show, every time you share the message about the other shows, you're doing your bit, and for that I can't thank you enough. And on that note, it is time to wrap up the show. So one more time to all of you, you know who you are. Thanks so much for taking part in the show. And I'm always the guy who signs off, and that's not fair. So Ethan, I'm going to let you get in the final word for the Australian Roundtable 2014, episode 12. Wrap it up, mate. Take it away.
Well, thank you once again for everyone that's joined in. Australian alternative media has come a long way from having 4 people visit the website on a daily basis to having a lot more than 4 people for my website. We really put in the hard yards trying to build the foundation, and I really appreciate the people that have been there from the start, the people that have joined now. And 2015 is going to be a big year. It's going to be the year of alternative media, and we're going to rise, and I really believe that. So please keep spreading the word. Please continue to support, and we'll see you January 4th, 2014 for the Australian Roundtable podcast. 2015, sorry, it's been a long
It's been a long
I knew I'd
right.
messed the intro up.
You're all right, mate. I'll put you on the spot there. All right. Thanks, Ethan, and thanks to everyone. We'll catch you next year.
Yeah, thank you.